from Neo-Aramaic into Ottoman Turkish. The translated letters were then forwarded to higher authorities in Istanbul, Babı Ali, including the Grand Vizier, with a selective focus on any content deemed politically sensitive or potentially subversive. This state intervention reveals much about the Ottoman Empire's strategies for monitoring minority communities. In this presentation, I will explore the content of these letters, the historical and social context in which they were written, and their broader implications for our understanding of Syriac-speaking communities in Ottoman era. To understand the significance of the Neo-Aramaic letters found in the Ottoman archives, it is essential to first establish the historical and social context of the Syriac-speaking communities in the late Ottoman Empire. When we say Syriac-speaking communities, we are talking about much broader area, but today I will more focus on Hakkari and Urmia region. During the 19th century, Assyrian communities, including those in Hakkari, were strategically positioned in the crossroads of the Ottoman, Persian, and Russian empires. This geopolitical situation exposed them to multiple external influences, including Western missionaries' activities that intensified throughout this period. These communities, primarily affiliated with the Church of the East, experienced growth in education, exposure to global networks, and heightened scrutiny and suspicion from the Ottoman authorities. Within this context, using the Syriac language in everyday communication became a form of cultural resilience. Despite the growing dominance of Ottoman Turkish and other regional languages, the persistence of Syriac, especially its Neo-Aramaic Surat form, reflects a deep-rooted commitment to maintaining ethnic and religious identity. The letters from London are a testament to this commitment, showing how language served as a connection tool across great distance and political divides. So, as a short, a few members belongs to Church of the East. They were studying in London, and they have sent a few letters to Hakkari, Koçanis, to their family and Patriarch himself. These letters have been captured by the Ottoman authorities, and later we have found them in the archives. Yes. So, let's delve deeper into the content and purpose of these Neo-Aramaic letters. These letters were either written by the elderly priest Hamis himself or by his sons Isho, Ezra, and Elisha. Each letter was addressed to the different individuals within the Hakkari region, Koçanis, patriarchal figures, relatives, and members of the Church of the East local elite. The letters varied significantly in style and formality, ranging from highly formal appeals to the Catholic Patriarch Mar Ruwil Sham'un, requesting his contributions to a weekly journal in London, to more intimate and informal letters directed to the family members discussing personal matters such as health, education, and family plans. This diversity in tone and content highlights the flexibility and richness of Neo-Aramaic language in different social contexts. These Neo-Aramaic letters are compelling evidence of the continued vitality and everyday use of the Syriac language during the late Ottoman period, especially in its Neo-Aramaic dialect, which was actively spoken among the Assyrian community. First, the choice of Neo-Aramaic for these letters reveals its status as a living language for personal, social and official communication. Despite the authors being in London, they choose to write in Neo-Aramaic, indicating that it was not only understood by their recipients back in Hakkari, but also expected to be the appropriate medium for such important correspondence. This suggested a robust and vibrant use of the language far beyond any liturgical confidence. As seen in the letters, the language exhibits a range of expression, tones, and register. The letters include formal appeals to the Catholic Patriarch, which I will read a passage from it sooner, semi-formal requests for support from religious colleges, and intimate and informal communication with family members. Yes. The discovery and analysis of these Neo-Aramaic letters profoundly impact our understanding of the Syriac language historical trajectory, particularly its role during the late Ottoman period. Firstly, these letters provide the direct evidence that challenges and the perception of Syriac as merely an extinct or solely liturgical language. Instead, they demonstrate that Neo-Aramaic, a dialect of Syriac, was actively used in various forms of formal and informal communication among members of the Syrian community, even they were in diaspora. Secondly, the letters underscore the impact of looking beyond the conventional sources, such as liturgical manuscript, to understand Syriac real-life applications. In sum, these Suret letters fundamentally alter our understanding of Syriac language place in the modern era. Yes. The Ottoman authorities' response to the Neo-Aramaic letters provides significant insights into the political climate of the late 19th century and the empire's relationship with its minority communities. So, when the Ottoman officials intercepted these letters, they were sent from London to Tbilisi, from Tbilisi to Urmia to Henry Shed, and by Henry Shed has been sent by a person to Gevar, but on the way some Ottoman officials had intercepted these letters, and so began the story. They were deemed suspicious due to their author's content. Okay. Origin and identity. The letters written in Suret by members of an Assyrian family temporarily residing in London were seen as potential subversive communications given to the broader context of rising nationalism, external missionary influences, and the fragile stability of the empire's eastern provinces. The authorities were keen to monitor any correspondence indicating foreign alignment or dissent among minority communities. The confiscation of these letters and their translation into the Ottoman Turkish reflects the state's heightened concern over possible threats. While we can show the next one maybe. Yeah. So we on this this is the Ottoman document, and we can see the summary of the content of the letter. So what they did, they couldn't speak this language, couldn't read it. They have found someone to translate it to Ottoman Turkish. So what was the name of the translation? His seal bears the name Tigran. So probably he was an Armenian guy. We don't know any details about him. Either he could speak Assyrian, Neo-Aramaic, or maybe he got help from someone else. First, when I have seen that, I thought that it has been translated by Uncle Nemrut, but it seems not. Why I thought about that? Because there were some other letters that it is clearly shows that Uncle Nemrut is the translator of these letters, but not this one. The letters originally written in Surat were translated into Ottoman Turkish. Interestingly, during this process, the language of the letters was referred to multiple terms. Here comes the interesting details. So they are giving just the details of these letters one by one, the first letter, second letter, third letter, about the content of them, and mostly focus on the political issue, nothing mentioning about the family issues, because that is the important for the authorities. And then the guy that give the summary of these letters mentioned that Nesturiyul Ibara, the language of these the letters, Nesturiyul Ibara. And the one official that sent telegram from Van to Istanbul mentioning them, exactly the same letters, by nothing mentioning the other say Kaldaniyul Ibara. And the other one in Istanbul, or it can be vice versa, say it is Suryaniyul Ibara. So the Nestorian language, Chaldean language, and Syrian language, this variation in terminology reflected the Ottoman officials' complex and often inconsistent understanding of their empire's linguistic and religious diversity. While these terms were used interchangeably, they also revealed the state's attempt to categorize and control its minority communities. So these terms were being used interchangeably without any confusion. So it was for them very normal to call all these names for the same language or ethnic group. Yes. To fully understand the context in which these Neo-Aramaic letters were written, it is essential to consider the profound impact of Western missionary activities on the Assyrian identity during the late Ottoman period. Western missions, particularly those from the American and British churches, began actively engaging with Assyrian communities in the mid-19th century. These missions established schools, printing presses, and medical facilities in regions such as Hakkari and Urmia, aiming to convert the local Christian populations to their respective denominations, primarily Protestantism. As a result, they introduced new educational opportunities and Western cultural values that significantly influenced local societies. These Neo-Aramaic letters are not isolated artifacts. They are deeply intertwined with broader historical events and key figures of the 19th century, providing a window into the dynamic interaction between local and global forces. The letters were sent and from prominent figures within the Assyrian community, such as Catholicos Patriarch Mar Ruil Shamoun and members of the Church of the East. So here I'm sharing the first page of the letter sent by Khamis to the Patriarch. Marshemun, our Patriarch, the crown of our head and light of our eyes. That is the typical introduction and starting to a letter to praising him. And then he requests him kindly to send or to contribute to a journal that published in London with the name The Christian, because the Qashaq Khamis has seen some other articles belongs to Syriac Orthodox churches or other. So he requesting why we wouldn't publish some information about our church. For this reason, this letter has been sent. So another example, this is from Isho. In the left, under the bottom side, we can see his sign says Isho John of Kurdistan. And he gives some news about the world and saying that tension is increasing between big powers in Europe. Well, it was in 1894, so maybe he could even now then could see the signs of the First World War. So, the next one. There are much things to say maybe, but I'm keeping in short. We don't have much time. In conclusion, the Neo-Aramaic letters from London to Hakkari, preserved in the Ottoman archives, offers an unique and invaluable perspective on the history of Syriac-speaking communities in London, in Hakkari and Ottoman era. Yes. So, few last notes, acknowledgements to my dear friend Dr. Yashar. Through him, I have discovered these letters in Ottoman archives, and with him, we are currently working on some other projects, such as documents about the uncle Nimrud and his relationship with Ottoman authorities. Will be published sooner, inshallah, as a separate article. And special thanks goes to my dear friend, my only Jilwai friend, Nicholas Elgido, for translating these letters. Actually, I haven't given many details about them because my approach to these letters was different. But good news, we have translated all of them, including the Ottoman part of it, and they have been sent to the Hugoye, the Journal of Hugoye, and now it is under review process. So it will be published there. We are co-authoring with Nicholas Elgido. There are a lot of other works related to Assyrian and Ottoman archives, but what I have seen so far, thousands of documents, literally, but only the individuals are working on them. So that's why I call that, I say call for action. We need a bigger project for such things. Maybe it can be an RC project or something else under an institution to cover all of them instead of here and there a few pieces of the documents. That will give us the opportunity to see another aspect, another approach, another view to the Assyrian community in Hakkari and Ottoman era. Thank you for listening to me. The last slide. Yes. On time? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ramazan Tورغوت. We will keep the questions at the end, if that's okay. So we will turn now to Dr. Afram Aboud Ishaq. Again, I remind you, please, no phones. إذا تقدرون تسدون التليفونات مالتكم بلا زحمة. تليفوناتكم دوريتون زحمة. لا أويا. Dr. Afram Aboud Ishaq is joining us from the Austrian Academy of Sciences in Vienna. And the title of his presentation is A Syriac Scribe from Athor and Nineveh, Mete Barfaulos. Join us. Thank you.
Taudi Sagi for your introduction, and I would like to thank the organizer for the wonderful conference, especially to dear Nicholas for his kindness through the organizational work. Many Syriac scribes between the 19th and the 20th centuries have copied manuscripts for different purposes and participated indeed in promoting the Syriac written heritage, especially when many of those old Forlage original manuscripts got lost because of the atrocities that have been affecting this region, where we are privileged to meet in our remarkable Athra Symposium in this place. One of the distinguished East Syriac scribes was Father Elias Shaqlawi, who copied many manuscripts, including the famous manuscripts of Paris Syriac 332, based on the unique Forlage original manuscript of Al-Qosh 169, with a revision on the now lost manuscript of Sert 65. This manuscript by Father Elias Shaqlawi became the base manuscript in addition to Borges Syriac 82 for the famous edition of Chabot's Synodicon Orientale in 1902 was published. The same manuscript of Al-Qosh 169 was also copied for Mingana by two other East Syriac scribes, Abraham Shakwana al-Alqoshi, which is the manuscript Mingana 47, copied in 1907, and Yusuf Abuna for the manuscript 586, copied in 1932. Another important Syriac scribe from the same period and also from the same region was Mangbulos Ja'dan min Talkif. Many of his manuscripts being preserved now in the ancient monastery of Our Lady of the Seats, or Notre Dame de Semence, which we will be blessed to visit in the coming day. There are also other East Syriac scribes from the same period and in this region. Just a quick check to the helpful list at the end of the Arabic catalog of the manuscript of Rabban Hormuz when they were still in Baghdad by Haddad and Ishaq, published in 1988, can inform us about many East Syriac scribes in this period, whose many of their manuscripts also preserved in the Al-Qosh monastery. We have, as we mentioned, Yusuf Abun al-Qoshi, Abraham Shakwana, Bulos Ja'dan, also Ibrahim Abbu al-Karakolli, Abla Hatuma Malaboran, Stefan Gorgis, Rais al-Qoshi, and Marogi Azmat min Ankawa, where we are meeting today. Not surprisingly, from the West Syriac side, there were also many important Syrian Orthodox scribes, such as Abd al-Ahad Qudsiye from Mardin and then in Aleppo, and Mattai Bar Faulos, who is the focus of my presentation. In fact, the logo of our Athra Symposium was designed as being inspired by one of the manuscripts written and scribed by Mattai Bar Faulos beautifully, which is the manuscript number 236 from the Konat collection in India. My research interest in the scribe Mattai Bar Faulos started while translating colophons from the Syrian Orthodox Patriarchal Manuscript Library for our forthcoming Catholic, with the honor with His Eminence Bishop Rogi Akhraz is the major partner and who transcribed these colophons. While trying to understand Mattai Bar Faulos' historical context, especially his interesting way of presenting himself, sometimes as a Syrian Orthodox, sometimes as Othuroyo, or sometimes from Othur nearby Mosul, sometimes with Arabized form, Matta ibn Boulos, and sometimes in a Greek way also, Mattios, son of Paulos. These interests led me through a journey of discoveries, and I'm grateful for that, such as knowing his remarkable production for over 106 manuscripts, distributed nowadays in different manuscripts collections in the world, in Mingana, as we mentioned, as you see in the list, in Konat collection in India, Harvard, Manchester, Sharfe, in addition to the Syrian Orthodox Patriarchate and other churches and monasteries in Iraq, such as Marbehna Monastery, Knesset al-Qal'a in Mosul, St. George Church in Bahzani, and perhaps this is the oldest and the first manuscript he scribed, and Baghdad Chaldean Catholic Church. The importance of Mattai is not only limited to his remarkable scribing production for those those who are interested in studying codicological and paleographical aspects of the manuscript, but he is an important case to understand the historical detail of his time in Mosul. We will see that there was a kind of network and communication between him and the Syrian Orthodox Patriarch Bathram Barsom with a family connection, since the first wife of the scribe Mattai Bar Faulos was the sister of Patriarch Afram Barsom, mother. So this family relationship was strong, but it was not disconnected when Mattai's first wife passed away. Still, we find that a lot of respect by Afram Barsom to Mattai, perhaps only for a professional level. And as you can see, the Abdel Noor family, and I'm indebted to them for sharing with me their archive. If we go back, so they are just simply near by the church, the Syrian Orthodox Church of Al-Tahira. So it was, and they also donated a lot for the church. This is another slide to see that the churches in Al-Mosul. Mattei, in his one of the colophon, we know that his second wife was Mrs. Fadile, the daughter of Khawaja Hawa. But we don't hear this from Afrem Barsom, perhaps not really interested. He is only interested with the connection with the Abd al-Nur family. So let's start with the literature. The resources that I use for my research on Mattei are derived from many of his colophons, in addition to archival letters that they were preserved at the Mingana, correspondence between him and others with Mingana. Again, I thank Abd al-Nur family for sharing this with me. In addition also to some other literature. As we said, since there is this family relationship with Afram Barsom, we would not wonder that Afram Barsom dedicated something in his masterpiece of The Scattered Perils to speak about Mattei Bar Faulos as a master in scribing, and he said that they are preserved, the manuscript, in different libraries. He is still living and has passed his 86th year of age. Of course, we have to understand he was in the process of writing his book, so he was still alive, Mattei. But then at the end of his book, we see that he put a date of death, but it is mistaken. This is typo, even the date of birth. Now, what's interesting for the English translator, if we can go one slide before, the English translator put a footnote here that he died actually on February 27th, 1946. That's correct. But he didn't put a footnote at the list at the end. Perhaps they thought that he was a different person. Then we know about his life upon his death in the Al-Mashriq journal, edited, published by the Bishop Boulos Behnam. And he, apparently that they are reproducing what was sent by the patriarch to them. So this is the whole life of Mattei. And we can know many details, especially at the end. We have the list of how many manuscripts he scribed. So as you can see here, we have round brackets, and it starts at number 52. But then we have square brackets. Apparently, and that's my interpretation, what Boulos Behnam received was only to 52, and then it was continued by Boulos Behnam. So for the patriarch, he thought that what he had knowledge of 52, and then Boulos Behnam found these few others. But we will see in the other resources that actually that they extend, and as we saw in the list, there are over 106 so far, and I'm sure that there will be even more finding. In the same year, the same period, with contemporary Syriac journal, which is النشرة السريانية, سفر السريوية, published in Aleppo, they reproduced that bio, but they added this paragraph, which you don't find it over there. Now, the editors of the Aleppian Nashra Suryani, apparently they were more aware of his production, so they said that he had produced over 100, so you see the 52, 59, and now over 100 was added, so, and even extended this number, and then they put the list where you can find them in different libraries in the world, as I mentioned earlier. So this is the literature, but also, as I mentioned, I go also through the colophons, as one can expect. After the death, many were interested to acquire the manuscript from his house. He was a famous scribe. So we notice in a colophon from the Patriarchate manuscript, Damascus 4:4, which is nowadays SOP 89, that they made a prayer after 1 year upon his death, and they convinced his wife, Fadila Bint Hawa, to donate the manuscript, this manuscript, to the Patriarchate collection. And at the end, it's not here, that you will find the priest said that I tried so hard to convince her to donate it. So that's how we know about her name. Other than that, if you would read Barsom and every other published things, you don't hear about her as perhaps as a second wife. Actually, in an account by Na'matullah Dunno, as we will see later in the archive, he always saying that he was faithful after his wife died, and he dedicated all his life for scribal work. And here we see that actually this is the name of his second wife. And then we have also his importance, how he could transmit the old dates for the previous Forlage manuscript colophons. So we find this in different manuscripts. For example, he borrowed a manuscript, most possibly with Ephraim Barson, who took this manuscript from Deir Za'faran, Tur Abdin, and other places to be copied in Mosul and apparently returned back. But in different places, he was so careful to say that we have compared it with the most important manuscript, and we checked everything. So there are two manuscripts from the Damascus collection, Damascus 4.5, which is SOP 90, and Damascus 6.8, which is SOP 245, where I will read, he said that we checked a lot for another manuscript to complete its lack, because it was lacking, and many pages were wanting from the Forlage, but we didn't find. So, and sometimes he said, and I don't think any other Forlage is important. So he was so careful by transmitting the old colophons and the historical notes of the Forlage manuscripts, and this is so important to trace those Forlage. And this had led me to what I call it as a pun, rediscovering of the famous verbose discoveries. While copying the original colophons of the Forlage manuscripts, Mattei can help us today to trace those manuscripts, such as the case of the manuscript Damascus 10.3, which is SOP 310. It is about the famous ascetic Athanasius Abu Ghalib, the bishop of Shihan, which Arthur Vobos had published in 1976 about important discoveries for the history of Syrian mysticism, new manuscript sources for Athanasius Abu Ghalib. If we read Vobos' discovery announcement, we will notice that he mentioned about an important manuscript from the church of Martuma in Mosul. He mentioned that it is in the collection, but he said that there is no colophon. So it would be, when I tried to trace it, there was no luck for it. But thanks actually to Mattei, because while copying the notes from the original Forlage and the historical notes in this manuscript in the Patriarchate collection, Damascus 10.3, which is SOP 310, it could help to use it to identify it. So if we move, I tried to check with Sony. Of course, that there are similarities between the description, but when I went to Himmel, a digital collection for verbose microfilms, you will find that only he is putting two images, that this is what he meant by this important discovery. And I could, of course, that the manuscript collections of Martuma Syrian Catholic is not available. You can see only two manuscripts are available. So what I did, I tried to compare these two images with manuscript 34. So I could find out actually with these historical notes, لما كان بتاريخ, this Gershoni for Matran Karas, and I compared it with Vobos black and white. Then I could find that the Forlage manuscript for this Patriarchate should be manuscript Martuma Syrian Catholic of Mosul number 34. And thanks to Mattei actually, who could help by transmitting, while relying on verbose, there will be no luck to find it. The final examples from Mattei's colophon and these important scribal notes, we have rich important records about contemporary historical information. For example, he is recording in 1888 of our Lord, a great famine happened in Mosul and its surroundings until the price of the measure of the flour rose from 3 gersh, qurush, and reached 100 gersh. In fact, we read this in these places in the manuscript from the Damascus Collection 415, SOP 98, but I could find a resource of it, which is in the Portland Daily Press, where they say, indeed, there was a terrible famine in Mesopotamia in that period. So thanks, but this is a common thing with the scribal habit to record a contemporary events. So that's what I could stop with the colophons, and we move to the archives. As I mentioned, there are important information, details that we find in the Mingana archival collection, such as the letter by Na'matullah Danno, another important Syrian Orthodox deacon in Mosul, and he wrote the biography of Mattai. And of course, he wrote it in 29, so Mattai was still alive. This is an important source, different from what Ephraim Barsom had written. Now, in the Mingana archive, that I could find that Mattai sent a letter to Mingana because Mingana asked him for his autobiography. Perhaps Mingana wanted to honor him, but he said that if you want, I had sent one to Ephraim Barsom. You can double check with it. So perhaps what Ephraim Barsom had published relied maybe on more reliable source written by Mattai by himself, while the Na'matullah Danno account could be another account. And then also we have in these archives other letters, important ones, to reveal the network with Syriac scribes, such as Yusuf Abuna, the one I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. Also there are other letters from Abraham Shekhwan al-Alqoshi. And also there are other letters to tell us about details, for example, about the ink and if the quality of the manuscripts are good enough or not. And there is something funny that if we go to the second slide, please, that sometimes he is asking for special medicine to be sent by Mingana to Mosul to strengthen him. And then, as you could see here, that he wants this medicine, and then he switched to Syriac. So apparently it was something to strengthen his physical energy. And I don't know if this has a connection with his production, but there are many of these kind of details and others about the contemporary life in the daily life of Mosul, such as he asked for a machine to make cigarettes, and then Bashir Abdanur, he's a friend, that he was asking about catalog for this machine, and some other details that to bring textile for his wife from England, and he wanted a very good quality. So this is again, at the end of every letter always has to make sure greetings, my wife to your wife, send us photos and send us gifts, and so very interesting. The archives also include letters from Ephraim Barsom, so this can reveal this network where we have connection between Ephraim Barsom. Mingana would send books from England, and then we find this archive that sometimes Ephraim Barsom would send manuscripts to him, sometimes to be sold. So we have also a network of book hunters about them, and he was looking. So he was not only scribe, he was like the representative of Mingana to buy the books, collect them from this area, and to sell them to Mingana to send them. And apparently Mingana was so insisting too much, I need that manuscript. And the surprise in this archive that what I was dreaming to find was the portrait photo of Mattai Bart Boulos. So apparently that's what Mingana had asked, and this is our hero, Kothubo Suryo. In one of the letters he said that now, because he used to be carpenter, but then he left everything and dedicated all his life for the scribal work, and he said that now I am Kothubo Suryoyo. So this is our Kothubo Suryoyo. So we reached some conclusions that we have networks between East scribes and West scribes in this region. That's my speculation, whether it has connection for his identity presentation as Othoroyo, Othor, Suryoyo, so perhaps this can tell us kind like trans-confessional cooperation on scribal workshops. Also networks of manuscript market, as I mentioned, collect, hunting from here, send them there. It could be different from our nowadays ethics, as we heard yesterday, but that was again the ethics of that time, because it was maybe normal to sell and buy manuscripts. And then we have, as we mentioned, contemporary details, King Faisal, even some atrocities when they killed the Christians, but I didn't mention that here. And then we have, as we mentioned, friendships. And it's a very nice thing to understand the human side of the scribe. So this can help us maybe to understand how scribes used to do their works maybe in the prior times. And thank you so much for your attention. Taudi Sagi.
Thank you so much, Dr. Afram Abboud Ishaq. And now we turn to Dr. Nima Jamali from the University of Chicago. He is joining us to discuss a paper called From Local and Communal to National and Global, You Will Be Mirza Live Through Times. And again, we will take questions at the end of this panel.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Can you hear me, or because I cannot hear myself here? Okay. Today, I'm eager to seize this remarkable opportunity, which was impossible without the wonderful effort of Dr. Nicholas and the organizing team, to discuss the life and times of an extraordinary writer who unfortunately has been overshadowed by the turbulent currents of history over the past century. To provide a comprehensive understanding, I have decided to divide my talk into two parts. The first part will present a biographical outline of the writer's life, while the second will explore his mindset. The subject of my discussion is Yul Benjamin Mirza. Yul was likely born in 1888 in a small village called Nazlu that you will see on rotation, like pictures of the like maps and cities and everything. Yeah, in a village called Nazlu or Nazli. Okay, yeah. No, just forget about it. Ramadan, yeah, forget about it. Yeah. Anyhow, so the village is located in the Azerbaijan province of Iran, approximately 20 kilometers north of Urmia, into an Assyrian family. On his father's side, he was a member of the Church of the East, while on his mother's, he was Presbyterian. The village was predominantly Christian, with Presbyterians striving to attract the population despite resistance from the followers of the ancient church. There was also a small and relatively poor Muslim community in the village that remained largely within the border of their own quarter, avoiding interactions with their Christian neighbors. However, in spite of the palpable tension and rivalry between these two communities, exceptions of friendship and coexistence can be found. For example, Ewell wrote about a Muslim friend from a very poor family whom he used to feed, and about Mullah Shakir, a learned mullah in the Muslim neighborhood of the village who was Ewell's Persian teacher and a man of letters with a moderate temperament. Ewell's family was relatively well off, considering the modest means of their rural village. His paternal grandfather was the village head, or Kat Khoda, known for his bravery and primarily involved in carpet trading. Ewell's father was a landowner and orchardist who owned 4 orchards and vineyards cultivating apricots, prunes, peaches, and of course, grapes. On his maternal side, his grandfather was a local preacher who established and ran the Presbyterian school and church with support from American missionaries. Additionally, his mother had a brother and a sister living in the United States. With his loving mother, supportive father, and wise grandfather, Ewell enjoyed a happy childhood, marred only briefly by a period when he was sent as an apprentice to a carpenter in another village nearby. He received a solid education at his grandfather's school with lessons focused mainly on the Peshitta Bible, along with some basic mathematics and geography. Syrian or Neo-Aramaic of Urumie was the language spoken at home and by most villagers, while Turkish Azeri was used to communicate with Muslims and the provincial government. Persian, seen as the language of prestige and education, was taught to him by Mullah Shakir through works of classical literature, primarily by Sa'di. Later in life, Ewell translated several passages of Sa'di's work to English. The tranquility of his youth was disrupted by 2 events. The first was his father's temporary but harsh indictment and detention due to a false accusation by a Muslim villager, exposing Ewell to the despotic nature of the royal government. This incident provided him with a first-hand experience of injustice and the precariousness of being a minority without legal protection, leading him to contemplate concepts such as identity, self, others, and othering, good governance, justice, and fairness. The second, far more devastating event was the sudden death of his beloved mother at a very young age. Around the turn of the century, burdened by these sorrows, Ewell decided to emigrate to the United States. His journey took him by caravan from his native village to the Russian border in the Caucasus, then by train from Tbilisi to Hamburg in Germany, and finally by ship to New York, from where after a short stop in Chicago, he joined his uncle in Philadelphia. In the United States, Ewell stayed with an American friend of his uncle's family who helped him adapt the costumes and learn the language. He pursued his education at the Biblical College in Philadelphia, and then at Ohio Wesleyan University, and finally at Johns Hopkins University, where he earned his MA in political science. In 1914, he defended his thesis titled Persian Jurisprudence under the guidance of Westel W. Willoughby, who he was a prominent figure in political science with numerous publications, played a crucial role in establishing the first Department of Political Science at Johns Hopkins. He also served as a mentor and role model for Ewell Mirza, influencing him to publish his first book, Iran and the Iranians, in 1913, a year before his graduation. Ewell's interest in politics extended beyond academic curiosity. In November 1914, he published an article titled The Possibility and Peril of a Holy War in Outlook, predicting that the Ottoman Empire's entry into the First World War would inevitably lead to a religious war in the Middle East. Tragically, his foresight became a reality, bringing brutal consequences to his own life when, in 1915, the Saifa massacre resulted in the slaughter of his entire family in his native village. In 1917, Ewell joined the U.S. Navy and was stationed in Europe after the war ended in 1918. He returned to the United States from France. He resumed his trade in importing and selling Oriental carpets, in his own words, while continuing to write, to translate passages from Sa'di, and to pen 7 more books. During this time, he married Althea Brown, the younger daughter of his American guardian, and they had 1 child together. In terms of literary genres, Ewell's first 2 books are nonfiction. The first is a survey of Iranian culture and history, we mentioned before, Iran and Iranians, and the second is a unique form of memoir that, rather than following a continuous narrative, provide impersonal descriptions of various aspects of a child life in Iran. His third book is a more conventional memoir of his childhood, rich with personal narratives, vivid scenes, and candid discussions of his emotions. He later turned to fiction, writing 5 young adult novels, all set in Middle Eastern context. Ewell passed away at a relatively young age, around 60, in Dayton, Ohio, on September 29, 1948. Now, having established this biographical framework, I would like to delve deeper into Ewell's inner life, exploring how his work, particularly his memoir, reveal his perceptions of local and religious identities in relation to national and global identities. This analysis will also examine how his migration to the United States influenced his understanding of his Assyrian, Iranian, and American selves, set against the broader backdrop of the transition from the ancient time to the modern era. Racially, Ewell identifies himself as Assyrian, connecting his lineage to the ancient Assyrian Empire, and more specifically through the biblical figure of Nimrod, anchoring his ethnic identity in a biblical past. Within these contexts, namely the biblical past and ancient Near Eastern history, another significant race emerges that deeply concerns him, the Persians. In his narrative, the Assyrians are portrayed as the more ancient race preceding the Medes and Persians who followed the Zoroastrian faith. Persian culture and identity permeate his work. For example, he opens his memoir with a description of Nowruz, noting that they celebrated the New Year on 2 occasions, during Nowruz, the Persian New Year, and the Christian New Year. Yet, despite this prominent Persian presence, when describing his life in Iran, Persians are depicted as the others, fellow compatriots, but distinct and different. Conversely, upon his move to the United States, his sense of Persian identity becomes more pronounced. His aforementioned portentous and precocious article is introduced as a Persian view. His first book is titled Iran and the Iranians, and his memoirs named When I Was a Boy in Iran, in Persia, and A Boy in Persia. However, in none of these works does he deny his Assyrian ethnicity or attempt to obscure it. He remains a proud Assyrian born in Iran, defining himself as Assyrian by ethnicity and Iranian by nationality, seamlessly switching between these facets of his identity depending on the context. Religion, however, is the main undeniable defining difference here. Within the social fabric of Assyrians, Persians, Kurds, and Azeri Turks, the others are present, not entirely one of Ewell's own group, but not altogether alien. They engage in interactions and transactions, mostly peaceful, as long as they are Persians, Kurds, or Azeris, or Turks. These groups suddenly become the absolute others when defined as Muslims. Even though Ewell has Muslim friends and speaks affectionately about his Muslim teacher, Mullah Shakir, the general ambience with Muslims is not amicable. Throughout his narrative, a pervasive tension is present whenever Muslims are mentioned. He writes about Muslims praying for a holy war or jihad in the village mosque, contrasting this with his community's hope for a pre-Soviet Russian invasion of Iranian lands. It is important to note that less than a century before, the Russian Empire had defeated the Persian Empire, leaving a deep, incurable wound on Iranian sentiments. Thus, it becomes clear that in his mindset, religious identity surpasses national one. The Christian-Muslim dichotomy is not the only religious contrast in Ewell's mind. Within Christianity, on a local level, he engages with the differences between the Church of the East and Presbyterian sect. Unlike the Christian-Muslim divide, this internal Christian tension is simply part of everyday village life and does not weigh heavily on his intellectual pursuits. Without firmly committing to either belief, he maintains peace with both sects. To him, the Church of the East is ancient, deeply rooted in the early days of Christianity, associated with his ethnicity, and imbued with mysticism in a dim, shadowy, aromatic, cozy building, embodying the past and the East. In contrast, the Presbyterian Church is fresh and open, housed in a bright, airy, new, clean building, symbolizing the modern and the West. He embraces both churches and notes that it was only during the long, arduous fasting seasons that he preferred the Presbyterian Church, as their rituals did not include fasting. This dichotomy between East and West, which overlaps with ancient versus modern, is most prominently reflected in his immigration to the United States. Therefore, his journey through space acquires a temporal significance. It is not merely a simple transition from East to West, but rather a form of time travel from past to future, from ancient to modern. In the United States, seizing every opportunity the country had to offer, he becomes not only not only an American, but also a global citizen. He learns an international language, studies at the prestigious international university, and even joins the military to participate in one of the greatest international conflicts, the Great War. He articulates this transition eloquently, viewing America as the epitome of modernity. He explains the differences in mentality between the East and the West, contrasting life in the modern world with that of the ancient universe. He describes how he adopted the modern mentality, embraced a new language, and adapted to the ways of the new world. This modern scholarly perspective is reflected in his writing, characterized by meticulous attention to minute details akin to a 19th century anthropologist documenting life in a rural village. While his style and thinking process are influenced by his modern education, his subject matter remains deeply rooted in the East. He writes solely about his native village, Assyrians, his own people, Iran, and the stories surrounding them. This tendency is also evident in his involvement in the carpet trade, where he brings something from the East, adapts it to the Western context, and sells it to the Westerners. He integrates the costumes and ideas of modern world while never abandoning his origins, his ancient Eastern roots, revisiting them through a Western lens, embodying G.K. Chesterton's famous idea that the whole object of travel is not to set foot on foreign land, it is at last to set foot on one's own country as a foreign land. Apart from his unwavering faith in Christianity, his identity is composed of various elements, including his Assyrian ethnicity, Iranian nationality, and international identity, which manifests as American citizenship. He navigates these components according to context. He is more Assyrian in an Iranian setting, more Iranian in an American setting, and more American in an international setting. This fluid, multifaceted identity is, to some extent, a product of his marginality. In Iran, despite coming from a relatively affluent and educated family, he is positioned on the periphery, distant from the center. He is not ethnically Persian, not religiously Muslim, and does not speak Persian or Turkish as his mother tongue. Geographically, he hails from a small village on the margins of Urumia, itself the second city of the province after Tabriz, which ranks second in the country following Tehran, the capital. This spatial marginality and minority identity keep him away from the rigid, solid traits that the center imposes on his members expecting adherence. This peripheral position grants him the freedom and mobility of marginality, enabling him to move fluidly between different aspects of his identity, between East and West, ancient and modern, past and future. Amidst these constant and unceasing transitions alongside his religious faith, there is another aspect he never relinquishes: his intrinsic talent for storytelling. Storytelling remains a vital craft passed down from his grandfather, the Kat Khoda, and his community in Nazlu, with the barber Zia being the most influential among them. About Zia, the barber, Yuval writes, Zia always said that when a story was finished, 3 apples descended from heaven, one for the storyteller, one for the listener, and one for the person about whom the story was told. I used to watch carefully, but I never saw the apples. Now it is up to us to seek our apples. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nima Jamali, and the panelists all for a really wonderful panel. We'll take questions, and I'm told we need to be on time because there's a picture and lunch awaiting us. But I know we have a lot of good questions. Let me see. Okay.
Yeah, I have a question to Dr. Ramadan. Dr. Ramadan, thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. Of course, we always distinguish between Neo-Aramaic and Syriac language. And perhaps it wasn't quite clear for me whether the letters you mentioned were all in Syriac language or in Neo-Aramaic Surat language. If so, how many letters are they, and are they accessible? Thank you very much.
Please, go ahead.
Yes, thank you for the question. These are in Surat, so Neo-Aramaic, not in Ktobonoyo. And how many of them? Just in this letters group from London to Hakkari, there are 5 letters. Some of them consist 2 or 3 pages, but in total 5 letters from there. But there are some other patriarchal letters that written in Ktobonoyo or other languages, like Arabic or even Farsi, with the patriarchals here, we can see. As I said, there are a lot of to discover. And just when I have seen the presentation of Malfono Ephraim, for example, he was mentioning Abdul Nur family. Now we are working with someone from Abdul Nur family, Nasser Abdul Nur, and have found a lot of documents related to them in Ottoman archive.
Thank you, and please keep them to questions. We have there, and then the professor here down. Yes, okay.
طبعا أنا بدي أحكي بالعربي. طبعا أشكر الدكاترة الباحثين اللي اليوم ومبارح كلنا أتحفونا بهالمعلومات.
دقيقة بس، العفو أكو سؤال. أوكي، بس أسئلة بلا زحمة. اتفضل. أكو لازم واحد يترجم لك. عندكم? Do you guys, are you listening to translations? Yes. Do you guys, can you put this on? It's not working. Okay. I will try to translate, بس. Okay, بس. hasn't started yet. تفضل.
طبعا أشكر الباحثين كلها اللي اليوم واللي امبارح كلها أتحفونا بهالمعلومات عن شعبنا السرياني الكلداني الآشوري الثقافي، وخاصة بدي أحكي اليوم يعني حكي الدكتور عن التجمعات وعن الرسائل اللي كان شعبنا السرياني الكلداني الآشوري إنه كان عدده كبير في مناطق أورميا وهالمناطق كلها بطور عابدين وهالأمور كلها. فنحن يعطينا العافية على هالمعلومات، إنه بس كان يدلوا إنه في عدد كبير من هالشعب يقدر مئات الآلاف وربما بالملايين. هل لازم نتساءل إنه هالشعب أين راح؟ أين داب؟ فطبعا نحن لما نفتح هالأمور الثقافية والحفاظ على اللغة وعلى التقاليد وعلى اللغة، لما نحافظ على اللغة يجب أن نحافظ على الشعب الذي يتكلم بهذه اللغة. نحن هالأيام من 100 سنة.
أستاذ العفو، السؤال شنو؟
يعني السؤال المقصود أنه يجب للحفاظ على هذه اللغة المختصرة، يجب أن نحافظ على على الشعب الذي يتكلم بهذه اللغة
100%.
يعني من 150 سنة وقبل يباد، وهالأيام حتى من 20 سنة اجى داعش وغير، تم إبادتنا مناطق ملاطيا، وان، هكاري، أورميا، وحتى هون بسهل نينوى. خلال هالسنوات يعني يا ريت ينعقد مؤتمرات ويقوم فيها الأساتذة الدكاترة وأنتن يبحثوا هالموضوع. وشكرا كثير.
شكرا أستاذ،
شكرا.
كلامك صحيح، بس أعتقد يوم الثالث نتكلم عن هذا الموضوع.
كانت
مداخلة حلوة، نشكرك. سؤال الدكتورة، لا العفو دكتور نيكولاس، الدكتورة قبله. العفو أستاذ، بس على السريع بالزحمة.
شكرا الدكاترة والسادة الباحثين. سؤالي للدكتور رمضان، معاك دكتورة أطلال جامعة الموصل، اشتغلت على الوثائق الأرشيف العثماني في طوال فترة عملي لم أجد أي وثيقة سريانية بالعهد العثماني. شكرا جزيلا أتحفتنا. العدد ذكرته يمكن 5 الموجودين الآن. سؤالي في عام 1894 ذكرت أنه بدأت بوادر الحرب. في 1894 نفس الوثيقة أكو نفس الشيء، اشتغلت على وثيقة عثمانية تذكر أنه مطران الموصل السرياني الكاثوليكي أرسل رسالة للسلطان العثماني عبد الحميد الثاني أنه بدأت بوادر يعني يشتغلون ضد الأرمن. هل أنه السبب بدأت البوادر بين الصراعات بين العثمانيين، يعني المواطنين العثمانيين والأرمن، كان السبب أنه لرفض العثمانيين لهذه الوثائق السريانية؟ ومن هي الملة، يعني رئيس الملة السرياني الذي كان يراسل الدولة العثمانية؟ شكرا جزيلا.
Do you understand the question? بس يعني منو اللي يتكلم ويا يراسل الدولة العثمانية؟ وقبل السؤال منو اللي who is speaking with the Ottomans? Who is which of the patriarchates from the Millet system is speaking to the Ottomans? You mentioned communication with the Ottomans.
It was. Yes, thank you. If I am not wrong, it goes back to 1861. So it must probably Marruil Shamon. Yes, or it is the end year of Benya, the Abraham. It can be both of them, but I need to double check them. Not only that, as I have said, there are other letters too in Arabic and Farsi. And some of them has been sent from Mosul, for example.
ناخذ سؤالين سوية، واعتقد لازم ينتظرونا. ايه سؤالك أستاذ؟
أولا مساء الخير للجميع. سؤال للدكتور رمضان، حضرتك ذكرت أن السلطات العثمانية قامت بمصادرة وتحليل محتوى هذه المراسلات ثم اعتبرتها مشبوهة وخطيرة. بتصورك الشخصي ورأيك الخاص، هل ما أقدمت عليه السلطات العثمانية يعد مصادرة للحقوق التاريخية والثقافية وقمع للحريات الخاصة بالأقليات، أم ترى في هذا الفعل فعل احترازي أمني يحق للسلطات العثمانية القيام به؟ شكرا.
سؤال عندي الدكتور رمضان، إلى متى استمرت اللغة السريانية لغة المراسلات ولغة حية كما وصفتها
في تركيا؟
هذا سؤال. وسؤال إلى الدكتور نيمة، العفو، نيمة. أنا بتصوري الشخص اللي اسمه ويليام يوئل ميرزا لم يخدم، خدم أمريكا، خدم الحرب في أمريكا. نحن كنا محتاجين إلى هذه الخدمات، فما الغرض من تقديمك لهذه المحاضرة؟ شكرا.
Did you understand the question?
My answer is simple. The communication never stopped till now, so it is still living language. Also, the date of these letters goes back to the 1964, and we don't have any other letters in the archives for later time. It doesn't mean that there was no communication in Syria, so it is still continue. It never stopped. No.
Yes. Because he identifies himself primarily as a Syrian, and he writes extensively about the life of Assyrian people in Iran, and after that in the United States. So that's why.
اوكي بس ما لكم بلا زحمه راح ياخذون صوره فنيكولاس راح تشوفنا وين مو. So we will go follow نيكولاس. لا بعدين ورا الصوره اكو شو اسمه غدا. كيفك ما ادري. ايه بس يعني اكو اخذها وياكم احسن.